In 2003, following the tragic death of the Dawson family at the hands of drug traffickers, the pastors of the Build churches in East Baltimore vowed that the family's death would not be in vain. The Build leaders reached out to TRF, a nationally recognized leader in community-based redevelopment. Together they planned a response to decades of disinvestment and neglect, which had undermined the community and stymied all opportunity. Their partnership was originally named TRF Development Partners. In 2016, TRF Development Partners became an independent nonprofit known as Rebuild Metro. The following is Rebuild Metro's story. Over the past 15 years, Rebuild Metro has invested over $100 million into two heavily distressed East Baltimore neighborhoods, and the results are evident. The Oliver EBDI section is a historic area within walking distance of the Johns Hopkins Medical Center, and the Greenmount West neighborhood is an energetic arts community north of Penn Station. Over 350 families now have new homes. Hundreds of formerly derelict and abandoned buildings have been given new life. Rebuild Metro has removed hundreds of vacant buildings and repurposed them as neighborhood amenities, creating parks, playgrounds, and gardens. We've invested in storefronts, people, and jobs. Each year, Rebuild Metro invests over $8 million into the neighborhood, which creates over 100 office and construction jobs. We are proud of the work we have done. The neighborhood transformation is clear, and it has been recognized, but we are most encouraged by the community spirit. We are confident that East Baltimore will continue on a path of health and sustainable growth. In 2006, Rebuild Metro made its first neighborhood investment in East Baltimore, focusing on the Oliver and EBDI sections. These areas are to the immediate north of Johns Hopkins and bisected by Broadway. During the planning process, community members focused on the map on your screen and identified over 7,000 vacant properties in East Baltimore. The Oliver area had one of the most significant concentrations of vacant properties, as identified by the red parcels on the map inset. Despite the concentrated vacancy, this area was regarded as a build-from-strength opportunity because of its proximity to Johns Hopkins. Essentially, Rebuild Metro believed that redevelopment could leverage the locational advantage of Oliver EBDI to attract residents to East Baltimore. The goal was not to rebuild all the vacant property in the area. Rather, we focused on rebalancing supply and demand as a means of building a strong and sustainable housing market. By 2017, sales data affirmed that this was the right approach to rebuilding the market. Following Rebuild Metro's investment of over $50 million into the Oliver and EBDI neighborhoods, three important outcomes were achieved. First, vacancy dropped by 90% as over 400 abandoned properties were redeveloped. To reduce vacancy, Rebuild did not follow the density patterns from a bygone era. Rather, it rebuilt based on existing demand, requiring more than 35% of the vacant residential property be repurposed as non-residential. Secondly, income diversity was achieved as new construction and high-quality design attracted families to move into a neighborhood that was previously impoverished and vacant. Thirdly, housing prices rose by over 600%. The 2011 median price of $18,000 was so low that almost no meaningful investment was possible. Following the redevelopment, neighborhood housing prices had a new median, $135,000. This was an important market signal and encouraged private sector investment. Local leaders had recognized without strong and stable prices, residents would be unable to use homeownership to create intergenerational wealth for their families. In 2007, Rebuild Metro began its second East Baltimore redevelopment investment, this time in Greenmount West, which is located directly across from Greenmount Cemetery and to the east of Penn Station. This was another build-from-strength opportunity. The redevelopment approach sought to leverage the neighborhood's proximity to Penn Station to create residential demand in Greenmount West. Despite the locational advantage of the area, it was highly troubled by vacancy, as identified by the red parcels on the map inset. There were over 185 abandoned properties out of a stock of only 450. Fortunately, Rebuild Metro and its partners were able to gain significant site control along Greenmount Avenue to start the redevelopment process. This redevelopment became a major catalyst, transforming the once distressed neighborhood. Following a $35 million investment into Greenmount West, area vacancy was reduced by 75%, and over 140 formerly vacant properties were reactivated. This investment includes the redevelopment of 2 large clusters of vacant lots along Greenmount Avenue, which were well positioned to support dense apartment building construction and are now home to the 2 City Arts buildings. Around the buildings, Rebuild Metro targeted vacant row houses to provide homeownership opportunities. Similar to the market experience in Oliver and EBDI, as vacancy was reduced, market prices rose sharply, in this case 545%. It's important to note that although this area suffered from abandonment, it presented very different market challenges compared to Oliver. Rebuild Metro's market analysis indicated that if community change were to take hold, it might undermine the area's long-term affordability for its residents. Therefore, Rebuild Metro worked to increase housing density using the City Arts buildings and assure long-term housing affordability using deed restrictions. As a result, Rebuild Metro's residential properties, which represent 1 in every 3 properties in the neighborhood, will remain affordable for the next several decades despite changes to the overall market price. By 2015, the significant changes witnessed in Greenmount West and Oliver were noticed throughout East Baltimore. The transformation caught the attention of Johnson Square residents, a neighborhood which is situated to the south of Greenmount Cemetery and to the west of Oliver. Without the type of market intervention and investment that had renewed Oliver and Greenmount West, Johnson Square remained troubled and distressed. It was plagued by a growing number of abandoned properties. The community planning process identified over 550 properties in the neighborhood, as noted by the red parcels on the map insert. Despite the significant real estate challenges, Johnson Square had excellent access to Baltimore's major assets and an effective community leadership driven by Rebuild Johnson Square Neighborhood Association. The Neighborhood Association reached out to Rebuild Metro to begin the necessary community planning process. The principles of the plan followed Rebuild Metro's previous goals. 1. Redevelopment efforts would not displace any residents, and 2. The purpose of the redevelopment was to create wealth and opportunity for the long-term residents of Johnson Square. The redevelopment of Johnson Square is key to East Baltimore's long sought-after prosperity and growth. As it stands now, Johnson Square is a distressed neighborhood situated near much stronger and more stable areas. However, Rebuild Metro's experience demonstrates that disinvestment can be reversed, and neighborhood renewal is a realistic and achievable goal. In this case, the revitalization of Johnson Square will create 1.5 miles of healthy and vibrant neighborhoods in the center of East Baltimore. They will move uninterrupted from Penn Station in the northwest all the way to Johns Hopkins Medical Center in the southeast. This will create a large patchwork of healthy communities in an area that was once all but forgotten. Driving Johnson Square's renewal is the goal of the Rebuild Johnson Square partners. Together with Baltimore City Housing and Community Development, the partners have secured site control to all 550 abandoned properties in Johnson Square. And the vision plan for Johnson Square, which governs the redevelopment, has been approved by the Baltimore City Planning Commission. Lastly, the investment in Johnson Square is already underway, with over $20 million of projects completed or under construction. This includes $18 million of residential development by Rebuild Metro. The Johnson Square plan calls for a safe, walkable neighborhood with diverse housing choices, thriving businesses, and an exceptional network of parks and green spaces. The cornerstone to the plan is the redevelopment of almost 10 acres of vacant properties located at the heart of the neighborhood. It is remarkable to realize that this massive area of vacancy is within walking distance to Penn Station and the historic Midtown neighborhood. It also has direct highway access to the Jones Falls Expressway. Using the vacancy as an advantage, the plan seeks to create a new park at the center of the vacant area and develop 2 mid-rise buildings to anchor the park. Across the street from the park, Rebuild Metro will rehabilitate vacant historic homes on Biddle Street and build new homes on scattered vacant lots on Chase Street. Rebuild Metro has already secured over $20 million in capital to advance the Johnson Square plan. To the immediate east of the future Greenmount Park, our team is already constructing the 700 Chase apartment building, which is scheduled to be completed in late 2020. And in 2019, we restored over a dozen striking historic homes. In total, Rebuild Metro and its residential development partners will invest over $130 million into Johnson Square housing. This will establish a housing market that will provide options and affordability to people with diverse economic backgrounds, while simultaneously ensuring that long-term residents remain in the communities and build wealth for their families. If you are interested in investing in Rebuild Metro, please contact us using information on this slide.